Hello and welcome to my show, The Awakening, here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo network. The information and opinions here expressed on this show are just that, the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experience. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. Hello, my name is Tina Huggins, your divorce coach specialist, divorce consultant, restorative family mediator, and co-parenting coach. Thank you for joining us today. Today's show is called Women and Investments, and my guest today is Amanda Taylor, who is with Expand Your Empire. So before I introduce Amanda, I want to give you a little bit of background about her. Amanda is disrupting traditional wealth building paradigms as the Chief Empire Officer of Expand Your Empire, where she guides ambitious women in building generational wealth through alternative investments. Her own journey through her divorce became the catalyst that transformed the approach to financial empowerment, revealing how society's imposed limitations on women's financial power could be turned into extraordinary strengths. Amanda is a fierce advocate for financial literacy and women's economic empowerment. Amanda is pioneering a movement that transforms feminine energy into financial superpowers. Hello and welcome, Miss Amanda.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm super glad that you're here with us. So, you and I have talked a little bit about your divorce, but I would like for you to tell our viewers, what your divorce was like, how you got to
Yeah.
here.
So I met my husband in college. I was 20 and he was the first person I ever dated. So of course I was like, well, that means we're getting married. And we did. And that was just the natural progression of the way I was raised was you meet, you date, you marry, you buy the house, you have the children. I didn't do that. But I did all the things that I was prescribed to do. I married the man I was dating when I graduated college, and um, we were and still are friends. But I do believe at 20 years old, we don't necessarily have the capacity to make the right long-term decisions, nor do we know who we are as individuals. So choosing a life partner at that age, it works really well for some people, and for other people, we just change as individuals. And we had our fair share of problems, constantly revolving problems. Uh, I felt like I was the problem, or I was told I was the problem. I didn't even have to feel it. I was well informed that I was the reason there were problems, that I was the one that needed to change, that I was the one that needed to go to counseling. And after 22 years of marriage, one tiny thing became the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. And I just said, I have to break this pattern. And so I went to stay with my best friend for what I thought was going to be a few days. And the minute I left, the immense relief that I felt in my body told me that something was happening here, and that just that freedom that I felt from that one decision, it was really the catalyst for a lot of change in my life. And so, we were married for 22, together for 25. That's an entire lifetime with someone. And to think you are a certain person based on someone else's opinion of you or a reflection of you, and then to, in your mid 40s, really find out who you are. It was just such a interesting experience. So, I carried a lot of shame for leaving. I did.
Mm.
I thought, nobody cheated. No, there was no physical abuse. And I just grew up in that era of just, well, I didn't even grow up that way. I mean, my parents were divorced and married 5 times in between the two of them by the time I was 7 years old. So
Wow.
when I got married, I was like, oh, I'm never getting divorced. That's not a word we say. And so I did. I carried a tremendous amount of guilt and shame for years before I left because I knew I didn't want to be married to this person. And it was so hard for me to make that decision to leave, but when I did, I felt myself. And he still, we don't we don't like hang out that often, but we do talk and we are civil, and I think that's a gift that a lot of people who've been through a divorce don't have, and I am grateful that we can do that. But it was really just a story of me becoming my own person, and not just becoming, but allowing myself to become that person, because I finally let go of his expectations of me, other people's expectations of me, and coming into myself, and that awakening that's right behind you. It was just, I had just allowed it to happen. And, I had to deal with the hurt that it caused. And yet I truly believe we are both better off because of it. And I knew, I'm at the time I was 45 years old, 44, 45 years old. And I was like, you have half your life left if you're lucky. Like, which one do you want to live? And so that was the choice that I made. And in doing so, learning so much about myself, I wanted to, I don't want to empower other women to get divorced. That's not my goal at all. But I do want to empower women to be themselves within their relationships as much as, they can, and to take ownership of their thoughts and their feelings and their desires within that relationship. So that is just what I encourage. And, the wealth building has its own thing aside of that came out of, my divorce. But yeah, long-winded, but yeah, there's my story.
Yeah, well, your story and my story kind of followed the beginning paths very close. Um, I I was raised on a farm ranch, and we were taught as the girls that you marry the man and he's going to make the living and you're going to help him on the farm and that kind of stuff. But I was intelligent enough to use my brain a little bit, attached, unattached, I would say, to the way my heart felt. I did pick a great man to get married to. He wasn't the greatest to stay married to, but he was moving to Germany because he was in the military. And so I left a little tiny farm town in Colorado to head to Germany. And it was the very best thing for our relationship early on, because we were together for about that 4 years without any kind of interruption from family or other people, and 3 years
You're
of
a
it being
team.
in Germany. Yeah, and so we kind of had to lean on each other, and I had to learn German, and I had to learn to start taking care of things. And had I stayed there, it would have been a lot more independent for me. But no, we came back to the family farm where my dad stuck his nose in my relationship and told me, basically set us both down and pointed at me and told my husband she is not allowed to stick her nose in any of this or to be out on the farm and do anything. So, and nobody stood up for me. And so my life started to disappear in the 4 year. And I stayed married for 19 years. Um, and like you, I was the one who left. I did all of the stuff, the house, the picket fence, the dogs, the kids. I had two kids, and at 19 years, I was a mess. I was literally a mess. My thyroid was out of whack, so my hormonal body was out of whack.
Me too.
Yeah, there we go. And so your brains don't work very well, and things just start to go sideways. I left 6 months after I left, I attempted suicide because I just could not handle it being my fault. and I
Yep.
accepted all the responsibility. It wasn't
Hmm.
mine, but I accepted it.
Me
I
too.
let the gaslighting come in play. I ended up with a broken hand, dislocated ribs, or dislocated legs, separated ribs. And I took the blame for that, that it was my fault that that
Yep.
happened. And it was through all of this. So I did step out in the marriage. And in hindsight, years after I left, I'm like, wow, I got gaslit and didn't even see the women's underwear in his truck was being blamed on our son. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't see that. But see, I owned what I did. I went to him with that, trying to fix things.
Hmm.
And it caused him to kind of grasp a hold of me too tight. You hold the bird too tight and you kill it. And so that's kind of the straw that broke my camel's back. And then, like I said, 6 months later, I attempted that suicide. Now, this is where your and my story separate. You went off on a building and I went off on a destructive path. I kind of destroyed my life for several years there afterwards and didn't do the wealth building, didn't do what I needed to do to get firmly on my feet.
Hmm.
And that's where I want our women viewers and even our men viewers, but definitely our women who don't have that financial knowledge. I want them to follow your path and not
Mhm.
follow the path that I took early on.
Yeah, I am truly lucky that I was in a career that facilitated that. I, by complete accident, ended up working for a real estate investment group, part-time, 5 hours a week. That was not what I had been in dentistry for 15 years. Like, I didn't know real estate. I had bought houses. But when we moved to Colorado from Texas for, my ex-husband's job, like, I didn't have a job. And this lady said her husband needed some help in his real estate, administrative stuff, just paperwork. And I'm like, okay. And it took off like wildfire. Like, I learned everything I could. I became so engaged in the business, in the financing, in everything about it. And, fast forward, 5 years later, I had started my own investing company. I started buying my own projects, flipping houses, doing rental properties, funding deals, because I had learned so much from my mentors. I was like, why do I need to keep just making them wealthy? Why don't I start doing it for myself? Right. And at the time I was married, and I'm like, oh, we have all this equity in two homes that we had at the time, a rental and our owner occupied. Why don't we leverage that, start lending it to other real estate investors at a really nice return? To me, because that was my industry, it was so natural. Like, this is so smart. This is the smartest thing we could do. And he was terrified of the risk. And I think, terrified of me making a financial decision that he wasn't fully informed about. Let's talk about that, too. He, and that's another thing I just am very loud about in general, is the societal norms of the man handles the finances. Women, you don't need to worry about that. What do you know what you need to worry about? Don't spend too much money. Be frugal. Look for the sales, clip the coupons, stick on your budget. The man will handle the investments. Don't you worry about it. And when I started coming to the table with alternative investment ideas and wealth building ideas, not just real estate, but through whole life insurance policies, which I teach about, that can grow money while you're protecting your family. He was so, he just put his hands up like, no, 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 you can't do this. You can't be smarter than me at this. And even if you are coming up with it, it's probably just fluff, because I would know if this was a good idea. Um, so that was the thing. I had been exposed to a way of doing something that I became comfortable with. And when I tried to implement it, I was shut down. So now that I am on the other side of that divorce, it is my mission to empower other women to educate themselves on all of their opportunity. And I'm not saying you have to become a real estate investor. I teach about all kinds of investment opportunities and, savings programs and how to protect your wealth. Because I do think that we have been kept quiet and silent and just stay over there. We'll take care of this for too long. We have to be part of the conversation, whether we're running a business or a partner in a relationship. It's our future too. It's our children's future if we have them. I couldn't have children. I don't have children. I'm cool with that. That's great. But to know that I have a story of a woman who is not even divorced all the time. What if something tragic happens? I have a friend who, yeah, I have a friend whose husband, yes, thank you. Husband passed away very young. I mean, I think he was 34, and they had 3 children, and she didn't know that they didn't have life insurance.
Mm.
She didn't know. So if we don't know, if we're not involved in the choices that are being made for our future and with our money, we are at a total disadvantage. And we have some innate, just females do. We are better at managing those decisions. We are better at mitigating risk. We are better at seeing things long term. It's just proven neuroscience. So why wouldn't we be vocal about what's happening with our money? Why wouldn't we want to share in that conversation? I'm not saying we have to take it over completely, but we need to be involved and we need to stand up and we need to do things that align with our values and have those conversations with our partner if we are married, about our level of risk tolerance and what we want for our future. It can't just be a one-sided conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So in my coming from where I did, I was the one in charge of the finances. So he struggled at the end of that to figure out how to pay bills. Had no
Mhm.
clue how to where the checks went and where the bills were at and those types of things. So I felt really bad about that. But that was, coming out of my marriage, I literally took the clothes on my back. Eventually, I got to go in and get the rest of my clothes in my vehicle, and that's what I left. He ended up with 40 acres, the house, the truck, his car, or the truck, and then a vehicle that belonged to my family. He ended up with all my saddles and things like that. At that time, he had my horse. Eventually, he couldn't handle the horse, and one of my horses died because he didn't do a good job of that. And my dad
Did
finally
that
went and took my other
happen?
horse.
Did that happen? Because I know I did this in my settlement, and we were pretty civil, but I had that guilt that you had for leaving. And I probably didn't fight for myself in that as much as I should have, because I was like, well, I'm doing this. I'm the problem. I'm the reason this is happening. So I shouldn't, be that person here. I should just let this go. I think I did that, and I'm assuming you did too, out of that guilt or
So some of it was my guilt and some of it was naive.
Mm,
I knew I didn't need to have a lawyer if we agreed. And we were going
right.
into mediation, and that mediator could give a shit less about
Mhm.
me or him. She kept looking at her watch. She was late for another appointment, and so she finally just said, "Sign it." I literally didn't know, and I thought that he was going to at least offer something to me instead of taking it all. So I ended up being naive enough and stupid going into this whole thing, not having the knowledge of what a mediator's real job was. And I ended up signing it all over to him, and he ended up with everything, and I ended up literally taking debt. That's what I took. He had one credit card with a quarter of what was on one of my cards, and I ended up taking the debt. He got the 40 acres and the house and everything in the house. I got a couple of pieces of furniture years later, and that was all I got. No money exchanged hands except for what he did to break a computer and books that I had to replace because he got mad that I left and destroyed my personal items.
Yeah. And I think that's a thing with women who leave. Um, Women who get left will be, it's kind of the shoes on the other foot. The man is like, okay, I'll do what I got to do to placate her. But when women leave, we, yeah, we just want to get out and we'll do whatever we have to do to make it go away. Um, and we end up hurting ourselves in the process. So I wish I had, and even if I did, like I had people telling me, like, you don't know him anything, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I felt so bad. I was like, well, I'll just give this. I'll give this. And I didn't have that same scenario. We were agreeable enough, like we didn't have any debt other than our two houses. We had a rental property and the house we lived in, and we split those. But the house that I ended up with had more equity. And he was like, well, I think you need to pay me for the difference in that equity. And I was like, well, you have a retirement plan. I'm self-employed. I don't have a 401k. And he was like, I know, but I haven't been contributing to my retirement plan because we had this property and I was supposed to retire with that property. And we kind of went back and forth, and I just said, okay, fine. And I regret it every day. But it was guilt, and it was just all the things at once. And I wish we had advocates, like mediators. They're not your advocate.
Oh,
They're
no.
there to get the job done. And we had an attorney, and the problem was we shared an attorney
Oh,
because we knew, like, we're going to split everything evenly. It's fine. And yeah, I I gave more than I should have out of fear. And I've been through a lot of counseling, and I was such a different person with him than I would have been with anyone else. And I could not let that go. In his around him, I was the bad guy. I was the problem. I was the cause of every issue in our marriage. I was the reason everything happened. And so I truly believed that about myself. I did. And so I was like, well, I guess this is what I get.
mhm.
And it's still a work in progress for me to recognize, like, wait, that wasn't me. That was it. He accused me of gaslighting. And when I was telling my counselor, she's like, that's what a gaslighter does. How would I know? I don't
Right,
know. I don't know
right.
how this works. Yeah, we're just, after that long with someone, it's just so hard to see from the outside looking in, I think. And
And, and I talk about this in one of my other podcasts that we're in the middle of abuse and we don't even know it.
Mhm.
Because it's kind of like sticking the lobster in a cold bunch of water and heating it up. It just heats
Yeah.
up, and people are like, "Well, how can you not know that he broke your hand? How could you not know?" Well, I'm a trained martial artist, and he grabbed a hold of my hand, and I released it and hit a door jam, and then he shoved me onto the bed and put his knee in my chest. Okay, well, that sounds like it's abuse, but he said, "You were so crazy and wanting to leave and drive. I didn't want you to go hurt yourself." Oh, well,
Mhm.
maybe it's because he cares.
Right.
Not. And then the last time you know, when my leg got dislocated, I saw that as abuse. I Nothing. There was no word said. He come in and he started on me. Just started on me. And I was right there at that door, saw my keys, grabbed my keys, ran out to my vehicle, put the keys in the ignition. By then he'd already come out and he bent the door in my van. So I punched his nose, broke his nose, and he just tossed me across a frickin' yard. And it was at that point where I said, this is it. But it still was 3 more months before I got out
Mhm.
of that. And I tell people that mine was technically situational abuse, but it was on its way to becoming normal abuse that we hear about.
You're right. And I didn't have the physical abuse, but I didn't know until I heard it from one counselor, and then I heard it from you in our first conversation, that financial abuse was a thing.
Yep.
And I was like, what? And then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh my gosh, he was so controlling over that part of our life. And there was a ton of other, yeah, I'm not going to say I didn't have fault. We all, I will. But there was an extreme amount of emotional abuse. You talk about attachment styles. I'm an avoidant attachment style and he's an anxious attachment style. And it just kept cycling through and getting worse and worse and worse. And the more I avoided, the more anxious he got, which was the more I avoided. And then I was blamed for not being the woman he needed to be all the time. But the finance piece of it, when, like I was talking about earlier, when I finally got educated and I got aware and I started wanting to help to make those decisions about where our money was going, I was completely shut down. And I didn't know what that was until, I got removed from it. And, me trying to advocate for myself and, not even like take over, but just be part of the decision, I was completely shut down.
Yeah. I am, going back into something you said about you had gotten a new job when you moved to Colorado in real estate. I see this a lot with women that when we start off a family as a stay-at-home mom, or we don't have a job because our husband's moving military wise, which is part of what my deal was. When we are that way and then we get into a job and we start becoming financially independent, we start having a life outside of the home, that threatens the man. It threatens his control. And that's when you see that narcissistic thinker come out of that man right there. That's what happened with me. And the more independent I became, the angrier and more violent the
Mhm.
conversations would get.
Exactly. And, real estate investing is traditionally a male dominated industry. It is. And I worked with all males. And, I was really good at what I did. I am really good at what I do. And he couldn't take that as me just being really equipped and smart and capable. He told me the only reason I liked what I did was because I got so much attention from other men.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. And mine
Nope.
mine was something almost opposite of that in a way. I worked at the sheriff's department and then I ended up working I was on an ambulance, I was an EMT, and I was a volunteer firefighter. And then I volunteered for a high angle rescue team. So I did a lot of training for all of that stuff. And he hated all of it. He was on the fire department, he was on our county, and I was on our city. And he just refused to go to training. If I was there, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that was partly why the high angle rescue team, because that was my kids could rappel out of helicopters and rock climb and things like that. Who doesn't want to do that kind of stuff? And then get this one. When I started working at the bar as a bartender, he loved that. I mean, here there was a bunch of men that was looking at me, talking to me, tipping me, and paying attention to me. Oh, he could give a crap less as long as he could go sit there with the kids and drink alcohol and spend
Mhm.
all my tip money. He could give a
Mhm.
crap less, even when he wasn't there with me and I would come home at 4 o'clock in the morning because we had a New Year's Eve party or something. He could care less. But all the rest of them, he had a big problem with.
Right. It's like whatever benefits them is fine.
Right.
But yeah, and it was similar too with his, in his industry. He was a teacher. He's in a female dominated industry. I didn't have a problem with that. And so it was just, there were a lot of double standards coming into
Hmm.
play in our relationship. And, he didn't approve of the way I dressed when I went to work. I'm self-employed. So if I want to go in an hour later, like there's no schedule. I can do what I want. And that just, he was so offended by that he had to get up and be at work at a certain time every day. And I didn't. And I'm like, well, I'm still working. I'm still bringing home an income. I love what I'm doing. And it was just always felt like this, like competition. Like we have to match or he has to be better. So you talk about them being threatened. And there are so many ways that that comes out in relationships and it's different for everybody, but I see it all the time.
Yes, 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 yes. And the whole interesting aspect to all of that to me is we as women, we go and do our stuff and again that threatening the man, it's when they're starting to lose control. They don't have control and so then he's mad at how you're dressing and he's jealous because you don't go into work at the same time. See, and I've been self-employed since I was like 13. Having these other jobs were just um byproducts of the work that I was doing or the people I come in contact with or just another training I wanted or something to that effect. But yeah, it threatens their manlyhood. At one point, when I went into EMT school, he actually told me, he said, "You're not smart enough to take that class." I was the top of the class and became the instructor. He just was so threatened that I was able to go back to school and he didn't feel like he could, like he was
Right.
smart enough to do that when he was just so capable. He was at least as capable as I was.
Right. And that it's just so sad, A, that it happens, and B, that we believe it.
Right,
Because I would question and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I must be this horrible person that he says I am. He knows me better than anyone, right?
right.
So I just, obviously he's right. And so it did, you talk about changing a job, and I really did come into my own through doing that. And it did spark that, like, wait, no, and his greatest fear came true. Yeah, like that I didn't get so successful that I left him. That wasn't what happened, but that in his mind, it was like, oh, you're going to now go make all this money and leave me here, which is not at all true. But we all have our own stories. We all have our own narratives of what happened. Um, and like I said, it's very fresh for me. We're not even a year from being final. Um,
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, but I talked to him on the phone today. Like we are civil enough and we grew up together, and I don't I have recognized the ways that he was wrong after blaming myself for so long, so I can accept that, and I can believe in him that he did the best he could. We just didn't He's going to be a great partner for somebody, it's just not me. So not everyone can say that. And I know that. And there are way more traumatic divorce stories and marriage stories than I have. I do acknowledge that. But what talking about my mission here is to empower women. Yes, I've chosen finance as the thing. That was kind of the thing that spurred me on, was like, wait, I've discovered this way to grow our money through what I've learned and what I've experienced in this new career, and you're not allowing that to happen. So, how do we have these conversations? How do we assert ourselves in this way? And, you don't have to start a job as a real estate investor to get that. I want to educate women. I think a lot of women are intimidated by the finances. They don't want to speak up because they don't feel like they know enough to speak up. So I'm creating an environment where we can learn. I mean, even the basics of the basics so that we can get comfortable having the conversations. We can know what this is versus what this is and really determine what path works for us. They're not all the same. And it doesn't take a ton of money to start investing. I mean, I always tell people if you don't even have your emergency fund or your savings account set up, let's start there and then, grow. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and I'm like, great, you're making all this money in your business, but what are you doing with that to build your wealth? You earn money in your business, you grow and you make money through your investments. So let's just learn more. And if we learn more, we feel more empowered to act in a different way or speak in a different way. And it just is a compounding effect that, education and intimidation have an inverse relationship. So the more we get comfortable having those conversations, the better we are at making those decisions and really standing in our power when it comes to that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I love that because I run across women all the time who don't understand the investing side of that. And the investing world is mostly men. It's a men's world. My late husband was an investor. And so when I talked to you the first time, it's like I understood what you're saying because I had spent enough time with him going through the investments and learning and then talking to other people in that field. And I have only run up against maybe two other women in all of the time that I have been involved with this that were involved in the investing world. And they were married to men. One of them, she was the guiding force of their investments. And then another one, it's not so much that she is the investing person, but she does all of the side work for one of the investing agencies.
Yep.
And so she gets to do a bunch of stuff in the background there that
Mhm.
helps her on her investment side.
Yep. Yeah, and it can absolutely be a joint thing. But you're right. It is male dominated, not just real estate. I mean, the reason I got into this whole education program wasn't just the real estate piece. It was I saw a documentary, it's called Show Her the Money, and it was talking about venture capital, which I had little understanding of, but I've learned a lot more about it. But less than 3% of venture capital was going to female-owned businesses even.
Oh,
So, not only are we not in the investing space, we're not getting the benefit of those who are investing. So, I'm like, all right, how do we start investing? Let's learn this. Let's be a powerful female investors who are way more in tune with risk and long-term planning. And how do I help female-owned businesses, product development, all these things? How do I teach them how to get the funding that they need to grow their business? Because it is available. And if we don't know what we don't know, then we can't act on it. So
right,
it's
right.
just all about education, education, education. And nobody wants to go to math class. But what I want to do is just make it accessible, not intimidating, and let's just make ourselves part of the conversation. That's it.
Amen. So that brings me, we're closing down on the show at this
Yeah.
point, but so how do people go about this training? How can they get that from you?
Yeah. My website, expandyourempire.org. There is a community that you can join that is completely free. That we, host informational webinars. We have Q&As. We're there to support each other and ask questions, learn from one another. There are a few paid courses in there that I offer. There's going to be an Investing 101 course that's launching within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And that is a self-guided video course, but we'll have weekly meetings. like I said, we started at the beginning. Like, let's have a vocabulary lesson. Let's get familiar with the terminology that people are using so that we don't feel like we can't talk about it. And go through what different types of investing are available to us, what the level of risk is, what the returns are. So investing 101 is going to be a course. And then for people who have done a little investing and don't quite know what to do next, I do have a real estate specific one, Expand Your Empire Landlord Edition, to grow your rental portfolio. And then I do, like I said, help a lot of entrepreneurs grow their business. So we have a race to revenue coaching program where we help them identify areas in their business where they can make more revenue and ultimately take that revenue, invest it, and grow even more money. So lots of opportunity.
Awesome. 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 I love that. So how can they reach you? You just gave your website, and all
Yep.
of this information will be in the show notes below. But
Yep.
so how can they get in touch with you directly?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook at Automation Maven. All of my links are on the website. There's a contact form on the website. The link to the communities on the website. You can just join right there. So expandyourempire.org is the easiest place to get in touch with me, but I'm on all the social medias. You'll see my links on that website: Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. I've never done TikTok, so I don't care that it got canceled, but maybe it's back. I don't even know.
It's
I've
back.
never done, I guess it's back. I've never done it. Apparently, maybe I should. But so yeah, they're all on the website, but expandyourempire.org is the best place to go.
Well, very good. So, as we come to the end of the show, I'm a certified divorce coach, meaning I'm trained in divorce and its complexities. I specialize in high conflict divorce, especially from toxic narcissistic partners. My late husband, my dad, and myself all experienced that abuse. So, I not only know it from my experience, I also know it from my training. You can reach me at my email at coachtinalynn@gmail.com. That's Coach COACH Tina TINA Lynn LYNN @gmail.com. And my website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can also find me on social media on Facebook under Tina Lynn Huggins. That's HUGGINS. On LinkedIn under Tina Huggins. On Instagram under Divorce Coach Tina Lynn, and on TikTok under Divorce Tina. So Amanda, as we close this out, can you give our viewers some last little tidbits or information?
Yeah, what I tell everybody is start small. If you're not even saving, let's start there. Let's identify two things in your budget. I know a lot of people are stretched, especially after a divorce, right? We're just figuring out how to function as independent beings, let alone, grow an empire. So identify your income and your expenses and where can you just start saving? Just start saving, just start putting something away. And ideally, you think you just have to put it in your Chase bank account that's giving you like 0.1% interest. Just find a high yield savings account. There you go. High yield savings account's going to give you right now, I think they're like at 4.5% interest. It's a little bit more, but that compounds over time. And so that's my biggest thing. If you want to start small and get a high yield savings account. So.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you. And so we talk about domestic violence on this show quite frequently. And so if you are experiencing violence right now, please call 911 or in the UK 999. Get the police there, press charges, keep those charges on. That is your key out of that abusive relationship. Don't drop those charges. If you drop those charges, it's going to get worse from there. So if you are in that dealing with domestic violence or know somebody who is, call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. Then I would like to have you please like, comment, and share this information so it can get out and reach other people. So Amanda, I've appreciated you very much for coming on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been therapeutic for me. And I want to help So many people, and we think we're alone, we think we're lost, we don't know where to turn, but there are so many people. If you're not quite ready to advocate for yourself, there are people like Tina, like myself, and so many other women I know that want to advocate for you and just hold you up in the time that you think you can't keep going. But we're here to support you. So thank you for having me.
Amen. Thanks again. And hopefully we'll get you back soon so people can listen to more of what you have to say.
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you.
Thanks again.